I watch her wrap herself in someone else's arms, paid for with my name. And while they floated through paradise, I build a gallery of consequences. I'm not the man who chases. I'm the one who records. While she played muse in a stolen dream, I turned her illusion into an exhibit. Not for the world, not for revenge. For the moment she would stand in front of a crowd and believe she was untouchable, until the screen behind her changed. This is the story of a betrayal dressed as a business trip, and how a silent man turned exposure into precision. She called it art. She just didn't know she was the subject. Ellie Cantor's morning began the same way it always did, measured, silent, and deliberate. He liked it that way. The kettle on the gas burner hissed just as the first shaft of sunlight sliced through the shutters of his Tbilisi apartment, tracing a line across the patterned rug like a blade of warmth. Outside, the city stirred, but his world remained still. He placed the mug on the windowsill, fingers lingering on the ceramic edge as if the warmth could anchor him to the moment. Then he lifted his notebook, flipped to a clean page, and wrote a single line. Tuesday. No noise. Good. The irony never left him. He hadn't spoken a word in 30 years, not since the fever took his hearing and voice at 6. But silence was not absence. For Ellie, it was observation. It was precision. It was control. Leah had always been the opposite. Movement, color, spontaneous bursts of jazz in a quiet room. She kissed like a thunderstorm and left notes that smelled of paint and cardamom. She filled their small space with gestures that bent reality. She was everything he wasn't. And this morning, she was leaving. Ellie, taxis in 5. She called out from the hallway, her tone breezy, a scarf fluttering in her hand like an afterthought. He watched her through the doorway mirror, linen dress, messy bun, oversized sunglasses. A curated accident. She paused, turning toward him, lips already shaped into her signature smile. You'll be okay, right? He nodded. She always asked. He always nodded. She leaned in for a kiss, not rushed, but not slow either, and lingered a second too short. Then came the touch on his shoulder, a gesture that once grounded him, now felt like punctuation. At the door, she waved. He watched as she walked toward the cab, her bag bouncing against her hip. The driver opened the trunk. She laughed at something he said, tucked her hair behind her ear. Then it happened. In the side mirror of the taxi, just before the door closed, her expression shifted. It was tiny, less than a breath, but it was there. A smile that didn't belong to him. A gaze not cast at the camera, or the cabbie, or the world, but inward, private, possessive. She wasn't thinking of him. Ellie stood there long after the taxi disappeared around the bend. The coffee cooled behind him. The breeze stirred the edge of the rug. He returned to the notebook, flipped the page, and wrote one more line. Something is off. Then he reached for his laptop, fingertips gliding across the trackpad like reading Braille. If silence was his language, then patterns were his voice. And something in her pattern had just shifted. He wasn't sure what yet, but he would find it. He always did. The cursor blinked at the center of Ellie's screen like a steady pulse. Lines of code ran beneath it. His own language, shaped and sharpened through years of necessity. Today, he wasn't just debugging algorithms. He was listening, not with ears, with eyes, with logic. By late afternoon, the apartment was soaked in amber light. The glass of untouched water on his desk had grown warm. On a secondary monitor, his software ran a facial proximity scan using open-source video data from the Batumi Art Horizon Festival, a public page, harmless to most. But not to Ellie. He hadn't been looking for anything. Just curiosity. Leah had said she was curating a side panel on post-visual narrative. She'd even shown him a mock-up flyer. Mostly lectures. She had signed with her fingers, brushing his cheek afterward. Probably boring. And yet, the still frame caught his attention like a sharp inhale in a silent room. In the background of a video titled Opening Night, behind the scenes, Leah stood beneath a cluster of paper lanterns. Not alone. A man stood beside her, fingers grazing the small of her back. Tall, angular, with a shock of storm-gray hair and sunglasses hanging from the open collar of his linen shirt. He laughed at something she said, the way men do when they're hunting softly. Her body leaned toward him. Not in friendship, not in courtesy, in comfort. Ellie clicked pause, zoomed, enhanced, traced the frame by contrast. His software mapped the body language, shoulder alignment, eye trajectory, limb overlap. It compared over 1,000 prior images of Leah's behavior cataloged through their years together. Parties, dinners, gallery openings. Result: non-neutral intimacy detected. Another click. Metadata revealed the time and location. Tag: O. Levinitz. Omar Levinitz. A name Ellie recognized, only because Leah once called him a firebrand in conceptual skin. A rising star from Tel Aviv known for installation work that flirted with emotional danger. Ellie remembered nodding. He hadn't thought of the man since. Until now. The program chimed softly. Another match. Different video. Different day. Same pattern. This time, a candid from a workshop. Leah and Omar sketching on the same paper. Her head tilted, his fingers brushing her wrist. The camera shakes as someone laughs nearby, but the focus remains. Them. Together. Too comfortable. Too familiar. Too frequent. Ellie's hand didn't tremble, but something behind his eyes tightened like piano wire. He sat back. The room was dark now, screen casting his face in low blue. She hadn't said anything, not a word, but patterns never lied. He opened a new folder, named it Silent Witness, dragged the files inside. Tomorrow, he would begin sorting, comparing, proving, not for the world, not for the court, for himself. Because if there was one thing he'd learned in silence, it was this. People reveal the loudest truths when they think no one is listening. At 2:13 a.m., Ellie sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by silence so dense it had weight. His laptop cast pale light onto his face, flickering with each loaded frame. The folder he'd labeled Silent Witness now contained 42 files. Screenshots, video snippets, metadata logs, facial proximity overlays. This wasn't paranoia. It was architecture. He was building a structure from fragments, angles, timestamps, and decisions no one thought would leave footprints. He called it a gallery, not a case. Because that's what it was, a gallery of ghosts. Click. A still from a rooftop party. Leah laughing mid-sip. Omar's hand ghosting her lower back again. Click. A boomerang loop, her spinning under fairy lights. The camera was shaky, handheld, but the way she smiled at whoever filmed it, lips parted just slightly, Ellie knew that smile. It wasn't the one she used at home. Click. A shot from inside a hotel lobby. They weren't touching, but their bodies leaned inward like parentheses, enclosing something private. He zoomed in. Background reflection on the polished floor. Shoes. His and hers. Side by side. He extracted the clip. Labeled it G03_intent. For years, Ellie had cataloged people with code. Face tracking, motion modeling, behavior trees. He had trained software to recognize false laughter, nervous tics, real smiles. Now he was feeding it everything Leah had once shared, knowingly or not. It stung less this way, with numbers, with lines and charts. And then came the lie. In her last message that night, Leah had typed, "Today was mostly lectures and walking around. Exhausted. Missing you." He stared at the message for a long time, then dragged another clip from the same day. Video title, Sunset Session, Couple Sketches. The thumbnail was damning. Leah and Omar seated side by side on a canvas blanket, sketchbooks open, shoulders touching. Her head rested briefly against his. The system auto-labeled it, event_conflict_07. Ellie didn't react. Not visibly. He created a timeline index. Each new entry got a reference code and annotation. It wasn't obsession. It was process. Truth, like art, required curation. By dawn, the gallery had grown. He placed each visual element inside a minimalist UI he'd designed overnight. Simple navigation. No sound. No text. Only images and metadata. A user would scroll, observe, understand. It wasn't built for the world. Not yet. But someday maybe. When it was finished. When the silence was ready to speak back. Morning arrived colorless. A pale gray haze settled over the city like wet silk. Ellie didn't notice. He hadn't slept. The apartment smelled of cold coffee and code. His eyes burned from hours of exposure, but he was wired, not from caffeine, but focus. Obsession that didn't shake, only sharpened. He opened a private terminal and initiated a secure video link. 2 rings. Then, "Wow, you look like a ghost, Elle," Miriam said, sipping from a steaming mug. "Don't tell me you haven't slept again." Miriam Ardashvili, ex-hacker, now cyber-forensics consultant for tech law firms and activists. The kind of person who could crack a drone mid-flight or reroute a live feed while painting her nails. They had met at university, once shared a dorm wall. Never lovers, too similar. But allies? Always. Ellie typed fast. His fingers moved like a pianist playing grief. "I need encrypted tracing. Social overlays. IP masking. Can you intercept private comms without server-side alerts?" Miriam raised an eyebrow. "Who are we tracing?" He dropped a name in the chat. "Omar Levinitz." She whistled. "Big fish." What did he do? He sent 3 images. Leah. Omar. Sunset. Touch. Miriam went quiet. Then shit. Within an hour, she had bypassed the encrypted exchange Leah used to coordinate with Omar. Not deep espionage, just poor hygiene. Burner profiles on Instagram, using filtered faces. One of the usernames at Ink and Haze. The profile was almost empty, save for a handful of cryptic photos. One stood out, a close-up of intertwined hands under dim red light. The caption read, "Truth hides in gesture." Ellie stared at it. He knew the bend of that finger, the half-moon scar on the wrist. It was her. Miriam kept talking. "She's forwarding copies of your old concept notes to someone's Google Drive. You see this folder name? Prototype Seeds." He didn't blink. Those notes were from his master thesis on emotional visual encoding. Years of unpublished research, now tagged with her watermark. The betrayal hit harder than any kiss. Not just love, but work. His work. Ideas she once said were beautiful but impractical. Now, they were hers. She hadn't just left him. She was replacing him. He minimized the window. Sat back. The apartment was dim, heavy with the kind of silence that precedes an earthquake. He opened a blank file and typed 4 words in bold. She stole everything. Silently. Then he saved it under a new subfolder, blurred lines. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He didn't scream. But something inside him shifted. And that shift was permanent. The city moved on, unaware that Ellie Cantor had begun preparing for war, not with weapons, but with code and clarity. The walls of his apartment were no longer neutral. Every surface bore traces of a plan in progress, flowcharts, printed screenshots, marker-drawn networks of data pinned with surgical precision. Truth, he'd learned, was a system. So was justice. Miriam called again the next morning. So, you want poetic revenge or something louder? Ellie typed his reply. Neither. I want precision. Revelation. I want them to expose themselves. She grinned. Then you're going to need a stage. They brainstormed for hours. Ideas moved like charged particles. Anonymous leaks? Too erratic. Legal exposure? Too slow. Public confrontation? Too emotional. Then Miriam had it. You said he's an ego artist, right? What if we bait him? Draw him into something he can't resist, something that flatters his vanity. Ellie paused, fingers poised above the keys. Then he began typing at a relentless speed. The plan was simple. They would construct a fictional tech art initiative under the name Vanna Black Circle, a Berlin-based incubator looking for artists, exploring the intersection of human emotion and neural computation. It was absurdly on brand, and Omar would eat it up. They built a website in 2 days. Sleek, minimalist, vaguely academic. Ellie crafted an invitation letter using real language from other fellowships Leah had once applied to. Miriam registered a domain. They even created LinkedIn profiles for the curators. The piece de resistance? A portfolio pitch sent to Omar from a curator named Elon Voss, composed entirely of quotes from Omar's own interviews, subtly remixed. An email arrived within hours. Fascinating concept. Would love to explore collaboration. Could schedule a meet while I'm in Batumi this weekend. Omar. Hook. Line. Silence. Ellie read the message 3 times. Then messaged Miriam. Confirm it. I'll be in Batumi. He booked a ticket that night under a different name. Nico Tseratelli. Common. Untraceable. He'd used it once for a college prank. Now, it felt prophetic. Packing was minimal, just a tablet, a pen, a pocket-sized drone camera, and a flash drive labeled Witness. Before leaving, he stood in the center of his apartment. The light was low. Rain slid down the window like silent Morse code. This wasn't revenge. Not really. It was exhibition. If Leah and Omar were going to make art out of deception, he would simply give them the perfect frame. All he had to do now was press record. The sky over Batumi was a theatrical blue, too perfect, too curated, as if someone had scrubbed every cloud from the script. Tourists strolled beneath palm-lined promenades, their sandals clapping against the marble like applause. The sea glittered, loud and pointless. Ellie didn't notice. He was focused. He arrived under the name Nico Tseratelli, checked into a quiet boutique hotel nestled behind a side street, where the walls smelled of citrus and silence. The receptionist didn't ask questions. A generous tip bought privacy. He wore plain clothes, sand-colored chinos, a loose shirt, no logos, no personality. Just another nameless creative looking to absorb coastal inspiration. His glasses held a micro camera. His watch, a silent recorder. The entire outfit was curated like a neutral gallery wall. He waited, patient, still, listening not with ears, but with calibration. At precisely 4 p.m., he walked to the cafe by the marina, just as arranged. Seated at the far table, beneath a white parasol, was Omar Levinitz. The man looked like his own press photo. Windswept hair, faded linen, jewelry designed to look unintentional. He sipped something neon green and watched people the way predators watched patterns, looking for asymmetry. Ellie approached with a notebook in hand, nodded in greeting, and wrote quickly on the page. Apologies. Lost my voice after long-haul flight. Hope this is okay. Omar waved off the concern like it was an old acquaintance. Oh, absolutely. No problem. Actually, it's poetic. He leaned forward. Makes this more interesting, no? Ellie smiled politely. The kind of smile that meant, keep talking. And Omar did. He spoke of emotional chaos, about how truth was a virus, about how silence was the final aesthetic frontier. He described Leah, without naming her, as a twin flame, a co-creator, a woman vibrating on a disruptive frequency. Ellie listened, not to the words, but the shape of them, the pride, the possession, the lack of caution. The recorder ticked silently in his watch. You'll meet her tomorrow, Omar said, stirring his drink. She's been curating the festival experience like a ritual. You'll see. She's electric. Ellie nodded again, wrote slowly. Looking forward to seeing your collaboration. Curious how your styles merge. Omar laughed. Merge? Man, she and I. He paused, tapped his temple. We don't merge. We collide. Ellie's face betrayed nothing, but something behind his ribs tightened, just briefly. When the meeting ended, Omar slapped his back like they were old friends. Excited to see where this leads. You've got presence. Ellie nodded, turned, and walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Omar had already said more than enough. Ellie sat alone in the dim hotel room, laptop balanced on his knees, the curtains drawn to shut out the synthetic Batumi sunlight. His fingers moved with precision, no hesitation, no second-guessing. Every keystroke built structure from chaos. By 1:17 a.m., the framework for the project was complete. He named it Gallery of Truth. The interface mirrored the festival's own website. Clean lines, serif fonts, minimalist design. But behind this skin lay rot. Evidence. Arrangement. A private, airless exhibition that would open to the world with the right key. Each item in the digital collection was curated, tagged by time, labeled by behavior. G03_intent. W05_duplicity. T12_symbiosis. The media sat inside transparent containers. Motion-corrected images of Omar's fingers trailing Leah's spine, stills from their curated walks, receipts, and voice transcriptions. But the final room, the vault, was locked. Not yet activated. That would come later. He wasn't finished. Across the encrypted chat, Miriam messaged. Everything's stable. I ran it through a 0-day container. No trace. He typed back. Ready to launch. She replied with a skull emoji and a firework. Then, just say when. And she's giving a speech tomorrow. He already knew. It was the Zenith Lecture, the central event of the festival. Leah would speak on the dissolution of identity through artistic integration. The irony wasn't lost on him. He opened the livestream schedule and linked it to the Gallery of Truth's backend. One trigger phrase, we must unmask ourselves, would activate the transition. The audience wouldn't know. At first, a few slides in, the gallery's projection screen would quietly switch. No noise. Just image. The scroll would begin. An unmasking, as she requested. He stared at the test run in silence. In the darkness, the images looked colder, crueler. But true. There was no gloating in him. Only necessity. Leah had always claimed that art should interrogate the hidden. She would get her wish. At the bottom of the screen, a black footer bore one line of text in pale gray. This exhibition is not fiction. It is what you did when you thought no one was watching. Ellie leaned back, chest still, pulse even. He hadn't built a trap. He'd built a mirror. And now he would show it to the room she trusted most. The gallery buzzed with low conversation, wine glasses clinking beneath fluorescent halos, the hum of anticipation stitched into the white noise. It was a modern temple, steel beams, concrete floors, plants suspended like ritual offerings. Leah moved through it like a priestess. She wore slate-gray linen and gold thread earrings, her hair pinned in loose defiance. People greeted her with nods, warm murmurs, outstretched hands. She smiled like a seasoned performer. Omar stood nearby, sunglasses tucked into his collar, whispering in her ear. She laughed, the kind of laugh meant to be overheard. At 6:58 p.m., the audience filed into the main lecture hall. Rows of folding chairs faced a floor-to-ceiling screen flanked by soft LED panels. The air was thick with the smell of eucalyptus oil and freshly unboxed tech. Ellie stood at the back, anonymous in a row of quiet figures. Badge reversed, eyes forward. Leah took the stage. She looked radiant, confident, rhythmic. Her gestures carved the air like choreography. Art, she began, isn't about capturing reality. It's about dissolving identity, removing the boundary between the self and the frame. The audience leaned in. Behind her, the slideshow began. Soft images, sketches, installations, blurred faces in motion. Then, we wear masks, yes, Leah said. But sometimes, the bravest act, her voice rang clearly, is to unmask ourselves. The trigger phrase. The switch was instant. Seamless. The projector blinked once, barely noticeable, and the next slide was not hers. It began with a still, her and Omar, under lantern light, forehead to cheek. Then another, her hand in his at a gallery corner. Then a receipt. A hotel reservation. The audience paused. A few laughed softly, confused. Someone whispered, "Is this part of the piece?" Leah turned slowly. The screen continued to scroll. Video. Her voice. He doesn't ask questions. He listens like a machine. Image. Her kissing Omar's shoulder. Email. Let's use the data. He'll never know. Silence took the room like an anesthetic. Omar stepped back from the wall. Face pale. Leah stared at the screen, lips parted. She tried to speak. Nothing came. Someone in the audience stood up. Then another. Chairs scraped the floor. Ellie didn't move. He watched from the shadows as her expression unraveled. First confusion, then realization, then raw collapse. She looked to the side door. No one moved. She turned back to the audience. This isn't mine, she said. But her voice cracked. The images stopped. Final screen. Curated by the one who watched. No applause. Just breath. And the slow ripple of consequence. Ellie turned, stepped out into the corridor, and vanished into the warm Batumi dusk. The corridor outside the gallery was cool and dim, but Ellie could still feel the heat of the room behind him, like the sting of a slap delivered across dimensions. He didn't rush. His exit was as quiet as his entrance. He crossed the garden path slowly, past metal sculptures and flickering ground lights. From inside, muffled voices rose like smoke, confused, panicked, accusatory. He kept walking. By the time he reached the outer gate, he'd already received the first alert. They've pulled the plug. Festival site down. Streaming feed deleted. Miriam. He replied with a single period. Nothing else needed saying. Back inside, the chaos unspooled in real time. Leah had tried to reset the system, but the projection was wired to a local cache, not their servers. The switch wasn't online. It was coded to presence, triggered by her voice. Her moment. Omar had already left. He didn't storm out, just peeled himself from the wall like a man walking away from a fire that wouldn't touch him but might ruin his name. Later, someone said they saw him at the hotel bar ordering neat gin and blinking too fast. Leah stayed. She tried to reframe it, called it unauthorized intervention, said it was a statement about surveillance and vulnerability. But the audience wasn't buying it, because it hadn't felt like theater. It had felt real, uncomfortably so, the kind of real that left marks. Ellie sat on a bench across the street, watching the gallery from the reflection in a puddle. His face was unreadable. His phone buzzed again. What the hell did you just do? A number he recognized. Her number. He muted the call. Then another. Unknown. Declined. At 10:42 p.m., Miriam messaged. Want me to wipe the site? Ellie typed. No. Let it stay. Truth shouldn't blink. He opened the gallery's admin dashboard. View count climbing. Dozens of anonymous comments had appeared. This wasn't art. It was evidence. Terrifying and brilliant. I'll never look at intimacy the same way. But one stopped him cold. You didn't just expose them. You changed the frame. Thank you. Ellie stared at the screen, then closed the laptop softly, like ending a conversation he never wanted to have. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just breathed. Deep. Even. Some truths you don't shout. You just let them stand. Unedited. Unexplained. And undeniable. Batumi's coastline shimmered under a sliver moon, the boardwalk quieting after midnight. Neon signs flickered in tired colors. The breeze carried the scent of salt and exhausted perfume. Ellie walked without direction, passing shuttered cafes and scattered flyers from the festival, corners curling, slogans already losing their grip. He ended up on a stone terrace above the beach, where waves crashed like breaths too big for the body that held them. He sat on the cold ledge and let the night wrap around him like a second skin. No music, no voice, just wind, just truth. His phone vibrated against his thigh. Miriam again. They're calling it the silent sabotage. Some say it's genius. Some say it's assault. He responded. Let them name it. I already did. The gallery of truth was still live. More views. More echoes. But Ellie had closed the comment section. No more reaction. He wasn't chasing noise. This was never about vengeance. It was about balance. Reclaiming what had been twisted in whispers and performed behind glass. He pulled the flash drive from his pocket. Witness. And held it up to the moonlight. His fingers hovered above the concrete. He could throw it. End it. But not yet. He opened his notes app. Typed. She believed silence was absence. But I built it into structure. Into frame. Into consequence. Behind him, laughter broke the stillness. Tourists. Oblivious. Free. He turned away from it. Not bitter. Just done. The hotel was 5 blocks east. He reached it without memory of the walk. The night porter barely looked up as he entered. Inside the room, he turned off every light. Sat in the dark with the sea still murmuring through the window. On the table lay a photo of him and Leah from 3 years ago. Someone had taken it during a gallery trip to Marseille. They were smiling, wine glasses raised, her arm looped through his. He looked at it for a long time, then slipped it into the trash. Not torn, not burned, just discarded. Closure didn't need fire. Sometimes it just needed a closed drawer. He lay down, fully clothed, on top of the covers. Outside, the city exhaled. Inside, he felt something like weightlessness. Not victory, not vindication, just stillness. And in that stillness, for the first time in months, Ellie slept. Not because the storm had passed, but because it had spoken. In the days that followed, Ellie disappeared, not in the dramatic sense, not vanishing into forests or far-off countries, but into the folds of digital shadow. He stopped posting, stopped replying. No new logins, no traceable moves. He watched as the world reacted from a distance, his only contact with the narrative being metadata and murmurs. The media response was fractured. Some called it a data leak. Others, performance art. A few whispered revenge porn, but were swiftly silenced by the facts. All public data. No nudity. No falsehoods. Just context. Brutal, curated context. A Berlin critic titled his op-ed, "The Gallery of Truth, where curation becomes confession." Leah vanished from every platform within a week. Her gallery bio went blank. A fellowship she had applied for in Zurich issued a quiet statement. "We are reassessing all submitted materials." Omar did a single interview. He wore a scarf, spoke of invasive appropriation, and tried to spin the event as a test of performative vulnerability. Nobody bought it. The comments beneath the recording said enough. You staged intimacy. He staged accountability. You played with fire. Someone handed you a mirror. Ellie sat on the balcony of his Tbilisi apartment, watching the rain cut clean lines through the city's cluttered light. The rooftops glistened like wet film. He felt no thrill, no rush, just completion. The flash drive lay untouched in a drawer. The website, still online, sat frozen like a snapshot. Static. Finished. Miriam messaged. "Want to take it down yet?" He replied, "No. Let it fade." And fade it did. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just gradually. Mentions dropped. Views stabilized. People moved on, as they always do. But something strange happened in the silence that followed. Artists, students, therapists began referencing the project, not for its scandal, but for its architecture. The Gallery of Truth became a case study, not of infidelity, but of structure, evidence, ethics. One forum post stood out to him. He didn't scream. He didn't hack. He designed grief like an architect. That's what made it unforgettable. Ellie copied the words into his notebook, then closed it. He looked around his space, shelves half empty, the air less weighted. The plants by the window still reaching for morning. Leah's scent was long gone. Her presence, a digital echo, archived but powerless. He brewed tea, turned off his phone. He wasn't building traps anymore. He was building silence, the kind that could hold something new. The email arrived on a Wednesday, subject line lowercase and unassuming. "Thank you for the silence." Ellie almost deleted it, thinking it was automated praise or veiled bait. But something about the sender's address, in.rashids@isfa.am, caught his eye. Armenian domain. Educational. Unusual. He opened it. "Dear curator, I don't know who you are. Or maybe I do, somewhere beneath the static. Your gallery, Silent Witness, was passed to me by a colleague at the university. I teach narrative media at Yerevan School of Fine Arts. We study silence, not absence, shape, gravity. I wanted to tell you, I've never seen pain translated so precisely. My mother left when I was 8. No notes, no closure, just an empty hallway and a photo album with no captions. Your gallery felt like someone finally wrote the names beneath the images, even if they weren't mine. If you ever want to talk, not digitally, but humanly, This is my address. Thank you for building something instead of burning it. Sincerely, Nana Rashids. Ellie read it 3 times. Then once more. It wasn't the flattery that struck him. It was the last line. Thank you for building something instead of burning it. No one had said that before. Not even Miriam. He replied a week later. No greeting. No signature. Just. She left me the lie. I just handed it back with lighting. They exchanged 3 more messages that month. Short. Unpolished. Real. Nana wrote with rhythm. She used strange metaphors. Called herself a gatherer of echoes. She didn't ask what happened. She only sent fragments of her own. Photographs of crumbling murals, field recordings of wind through piano wire, scanned pages from student notebooks where grief spilled into charcoal. Ellie didn't open up. Not yet. But he listened. And for the first time in a long time, he felt no need to interpret. No pressure to translate. One night, she wrote, "Sometimes I think people like us don't want noise. We just want someone to sit beside us and not fill the silence with rescue." He stared at that line for an hour. Then he typed, "I'm still sitting." He hit send. No poetry. No proof. But for him, that was the loudest thing he'd said in months. She rang the doorbell at 10:12 a.m. sharp. As if punctuality could undo the erosion. Ellie stood behind the front curtain, watching Leah through a narrow slit. She wore beige, her default armor, and carried a worn leather bag that looked heavier than it should. Her hair was tied back, clean but unstyled. No performance today, just wreckage and makeup. He opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Hi," she said. He didn't move. "I came to pick up my things," she continued, voice tight. "I thought it would be better if we talked." Behind him, the house was colder. Not physically, structurally. Her absence had redrawn the floor plan. There were no photos. No scent. No trace. Even the mug she used had been boxed. Ellie stepped aside, not a gesture of welcome, but of allowance. She walked in, slowly, looking around like a guest in a replica of her past. The boxes were stacked near the fireplace, each one labeled with surgical calm. Clothes, books, studio supplies, miscellaneous, agreed. On top, a sealed envelope. Her name handwritten. She touched it with the tips of her fingers. "Is this?" He nodded once. She opened it. Inside, a printed inventory, notarized statement, and a QR code leading to a secure cloud archive, photos, documents, voice memos. He had cataloged it all. Everything he had of her. Everything she might still claim. She sat on the couch, her old spot. He didn't. "Is this really it?" she asked quietly. "After everything?" He typed on his phone and held it out. "Everything happened. That's why it's over." Her face twitched. "You know I didn't mean for it to go that far." He replied without typing. "You planned it." Leah flinched. "It wasn't about replacing you. It was about finding something else. I didn't know I was lost until I was already gone." Ellie crossed his arms. Still, watching. She blinked rapidly. "You haven't said a word. You haven't even yelled." I expected more than silence." He held up the phone again. "Silence is what you left me with. I just answered in kind." She covered her mouth. Tears formed but didn't fall. "Do you hate me?" He shook his head, then typed one final line. "I don't carry what I've already put down." Then he opened the front door. She stood slowly, picked up the first box, and passed him on the way out without another word. He watched her walk away, and didn't follow, because she wasn't leaving his house. She was leaving someone else's. Time passed, but not like a clock. More like erosion. Edges softened. Shapes changed. What remained was only what refused to be worn down. Ellie didn't vanish. He recalibrated. In the quiet hum of post-storm stillness, he began rebuilding. Not himself, but the way he chose to take up space in the world. He kept the apartment, but moved everything. New arrangement. Furniture shifted. Shelves stripped of memory, filled instead with materials. Graphite, filament, code fragments printed on rice paper. A blank beginning. The gallery of truth remained live, but static. Miriam offered to archive it. He declined. Let it age, he typed. Like scar tissue. In unexpected corners of the internet, it had become something else. A teaching tool. A case study. A philosophical wedge. Students wrote theses on truth as interface. Designers cited its architecture as ethical UX. Therapists referenced it as visual catharsis for betrayal trauma. It became less about the story, more about the structure of clarity. Miriam texted, "You know you accidentally created a movement, right?" He responded, "No movement, just subtraction." But something in him shifted again. Not back, forward. He began drafting the framework for a new project. Title: Silence versus Signal. Concept: an open-source tool that visualized the emotional weight of language. By letting users input text and receive a visual representation of its impact. Each entry became a shape, a pulse, a shadow. No usernames. No storage. No archive. Just reflection. He launched a beta version quietly. No PR. No signature. Just a black page with white text. Speak softly. See louder. Within a week, it had 12,000 entries. Within a month, 70,000. One user wrote, "I typed a sentence I couldn't say out loud. The shape it gave back broke me, then held me." Ellie didn't reply. He just kept improving the system. He wasn't building traps anymore. Not exposing anyone. Just giving people a language for things they couldn't name. One afternoon, an anonymous donation arrived. 2,000 euros. No message. Just a reference code. F20 slipline. He recognized it. One of Leah's old project tags. He didn't respond. Didn't refund it. Just logged it under. Reversal. Not return, but recognition. Outside, the weather turned. Leaves shifted. And Ellie, for the first time, didn't brace himself. The message was simple. No emojis. No small talk. Just coming to Tbilisi for a workshop. Coffee. It was from Nana. 3 weeks since her last email. 5 since their exchange had gone quiet. Not out of disinterest, but natural rhythm. Like the kind of silence that feels like space, not absence. Ellie stared at the screen, then typed, "Friday, for PM Zurub Cafe. Outside table." She replied with a thumbs up and the words, "I'll be the one who doesn't rush." He arrived 10 minutes early. The cafe sat on a hillside road, tucked behind terracotta balconies and grapevines hanging from telephone wires. The scent of strong coffee and fresh earth lingered like punctuation between breaths. She was already there. Nana Rashid's looked exactly as she wrote, quietly vivid. Short black coat, boots dusted with travel, hair tied in a looped scarf that looked like it had stories sewn into the weave. When she saw him, she didn't stand, just lifted her cup slightly and nodded in greeting. Ellie sat. For a moment, they didn't speak. Not out of awkwardness, just agreement. Then she reached into her bag and placed a small tablet on the table. Opened an app. Typed a line. The device read aloud. Sometimes it helps to hear your own silence. Ellie smiled. Unexpectedly warm. She gestured to the screen. "Students made it for me," she said. "I don't use it often, but you deserve something that responds." He took out his own phone, typed a message, and turned it toward her. I've never heard my words before. Not really. Not aloud. Like a new limb? She asked. He nodded. They spoke like that for over an hour. Typed. Paused. Watched the wind move through the vines. Laughed at mismatched phrasing from the voice app. She told him about a student who wrote love letters to her dead brother in Morse code. He told her about a girl in school who thought sign language was a secret dance. At one point, she leaned forward. Did it help? She asked. The gallery, she clarified. Did it heal anything? Ellie typed slowly. It didn't sew the wound, but it made the scar feel earned. She nodded. That's enough. That's more than most. As they parted, she tapped her fingers twice on the back of his hand. A signal, not romantic, not shy, just present. He watched her walk away, then sat a while longer, breathing, listening, and somewhere in his chest, the silence shifted. It was no longer empty. It was shared. The message came late, like most things built on fear. No subject line, no greeting, just a single sentence. He's preparing a statement. Attached was a screenshot of a private press release draft from a gallery in Prague. Omar, planning to address the manipulation of his image and the unauthorized use of personal recordings. A pivot, a reframe, a lie. Ellie stared at the screen, not in anger, but calculation. It was inevitable. Narcissists don't retreat, they recast. If you couldn't deny the content, deny the context. Make the exposure seem like exploitation. He sent the file to Miriam. She responded with a dry, "Of course he is. Want me to pull receipts?" "No," Ellie typed. "We already have everything. Let's use the frame we built." That night, he returned to the Gallery of Truth for the first time in months. The admin panel hadn't changed. The interface still bore the final timestamp. He created a new section, titled it Appendix, Timeline of Events. No narration, no emotional cues, just precision. The dates, the data, screenshots of reservation confirmations in Omar's name, snippets of metadata showing Leah's location against emails she claimed were sent from home, audio transcripts, source authentication. At the top of the page, in grayscale. When someone tries to rewrite history, let the timestamps speak. He didn't blast the update to social channels. No dramatic tweet. No press alert. Just a quiet backend update that sat and waited. 2 days later, Omar's statement went live. He used phrases like digital smear campaign and emotional sabotage masked as art. He claimed he was the subject of a socio-technical stalking initiative. The response? Mixed. But the gallery had already changed the story's immune system. People cross-checked, searched the site, shared links. Reddit threads emerged. Omar's own voice disproves his claim at timestamp 1 hour 7 minutes and 13 seconds. Bro, you literally laughed about it on tape. Within 24 hours, the Prague Gallery paused the exhibit. By 48, his interview vanished from their archive. Miriam messaged, "You didn't fight him. You let him hang himself on his own words." Ellie responded, "The truth has gravity. It doesn't need a push." He turned off the screen, walked to the window. Rain stitched down the glass in rhythmic patterns. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt clean. There was a difference. The media cycle slowed, like all storms eventually do. Outrage mutated into analysis. The chaos that once clung to every word faded into interpretation. Ellie watched from the periphery, exactly where he preferred to be. He wasn't tagged anymore. Not directly. His name, never public. His face, never claimed. But the shape of his story echoed in unexpected places. Academic forums cited the Gallery of Truth as a rare example of digital justice without retribution. Design blogs dissected the interface, calling it minimalism weaponized through restraint. Therapists included it in lists of nonverbal tools for recovering agency. And beneath the surface, something deeper stirred. People began writing to the site, not to ask, not to challenge, but to tell. I saw myself in the timeline, even though the names were different. I showed this to my partner. It helped us start a real conversation. I didn't know silence could teach until now. One message stood out. You didn't scream. You didn't accuse. You didn't humiliate. You structured pain like architecture. That's what made it unforgettable. Ellie copied the words into his notebook. A quiet acknowledgement. Not praise, recognition. He no longer checked the analytics. But Miriam did. She texted. It plateaued. Views steady. People don't rage share it anymore. They study it. He typed back. Good. It wasn't built for noise. Outside, spring approached. Tbilisi shifted, green pushing through stone. Laundry lines sagged under softer fabrics. Street cats wandered like monarchs. Ellie biked again. On weekends. Same river path he once rode before all this began. Now with fewer ghosts trailing behind. He kept the sight up, kept the silence polished. Until one morning, a donation came through. Anonymous. 2,000 euros. No message. Just a single reference code. F20 slipline. He froze. Not in fear. Not in anger. Just clarity. It was one of Leah's old grant tags. He remembered the notation. She used it on early drafts when submitting shared work. He didn't trace the transaction. Didn't write back. He simply logged it. Filed under a new category in his private archive. Echo. Gesture without request. Then he sat in the garden, beneath a slowly waking tree, and let the sun press against his eyelids. No more war. No more unmasking. Just breath. Because truth, when it finally lands, doesn't crash. It settles. It arrived in an unmarked envelope, hand-delivered by a local courier who didn't ask for a signature. Just nodded and left. Inside, a small, matte black USB drive. No note. No branding. Just a faint red smudge on the edge of the casing, like it had been clutched too tightly before being sent. Ellie turned it over in his hand twice before placing it into a clean port, isolated from his network. The screen blinked, recognized it immediately. One file. No password. No name. Just a timestamp. 14_42_33.mov. He clicked. The video opened in vertical format. Shaky. Handheld. A woman sat alone in a dim room, backlit by dusk through sheer curtains. Her profile was unmistakable, Leah. No makeup. No framing. No art direction. Just her. She looked into the camera, then away. Then back again. I don't want to explain. I think that would make it worse, she said. This isn't a performance. No edits. No narrative. Just honesty, I guess. For whatever that's worth. She inhaled. The breath shook. You never screamed at me. Not once. Not when you found out. Not when I lied to your face. That silence, it wasn't passive. It was powerful. It was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. She swallowed hard. I wanted to say I'm sorry. But not for what I did. You already saw what I did. I'm sorry for who I became to do it. That version of me. I don't recognize her anymore. I used your trust like currency. And when it ran out, I blamed the cost on you. She looked down. For a long time. Then back up. You never needed to humiliate me. Because you knew the truth would do it better. And it did. I'll carry that. The screen stayed on her face for 10 more seconds. Then it went black. Ellie didn't move, didn't save it, didn't copy it. He removed the flash drive, walked to the riverbank near the edge of the old quarter, and knelt at the wall. There, in a narrow crack between stone slabs, he slid the device out of sight, watched as the current lapped quietly below. It didn't feel like victory or closure. It felt like removing a splinter that had gone too deep to bleed. Some truths don't need storage. Some apologies don't need reply. The building was small, unmarked from the street. Just a single glass door framed by ivy and a quiet plaque. Syntax Gallery. No tagline. No schedule. Just a name. Inside, the space was stripped of ornament. White walls. High ceilings. Wooden floors that whispered under every footstep. Light came from above, filtered through layered glass like memory. Ellie stood in the far room, not as a curator, not as an architect of vengeance, but as a host. He had built this space for people like him, those who processed pain without language, artists who couldn't speak or chose not to, people whose silence wasn't broken, just misunderstood. The gallery opened slowly, quietly. No press, no sponsors. Word spread through educators, therapists, and fringe artists. Each installation was soundless. Visual essays, motion-triggered lights, touch-reactive textiles, haptic poems, grief that shimmered when approached. On Thursdays, Nana helped curate the northeast wing. She never explained the pieces. She just guided viewers toward them, then stepped back and watched. At closing time, they often sat on the gallery's rooftop with tea and no agenda. One evening, a teenage girl from Kutaisi brought a sculpture, a pile of ash sealed in resin. She wrote only one sentence beside it. "This is what I became when they stopped believing me." Ellie installed it in the West Wing. Centered, spotlit, untitled. He didn't need her to say more. That was the point. One afternoon, a journalist arrived unannounced. Polite, soft-spoken, eyes trained for conflict. She asked, "What do you hope people feel here?" Ellie typed his answer on the gallery tablet. Understood, even if unspoken. She nodded, wrote something in a small leather notebook. Didn't ask about the gallery of truth. Didn't mention the past. That was rare and kind. When she left, Nana turned to him. "You know," she said, "there are people who think this whole place was your revenge." Ellie smiled faintly, then tapped the railing beside them twice. "I know," she added, "but I think it's the opposite." He looked up. The sky was turning the soft blue of late afternoon, birds etching commas between rooftops. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small slip of paper, a hand-drawn breath diagram from one of the recent exhibits. He didn't read it, just held it between his fingers and let the wind carry it out of his hand. He wasn't rebuilding from rubble anymore. He was building from calm. The dog came from a shelter in Vake, scrappy, undersized, part whippet, part anxious mystery. Ellie didn't choose him. The dog chose to curl beside his feet and blink, as if to say, "I know about silence too." He named him Punct. Like punctuation, like finality. They moved into a smaller apartment on the opposite side of the city, with high windows and no echoes. No curated walls. No ghosts framed in oak. Just a clean desk, a low bookshelf, and a view of the hills stitched in slow mist. No shrine to pain. No museum to the past. No need to hold what had already let go. One morning, as he brewed coffee, the doorbell rang. Courier again. A padded envelope, signed with a sticker from the city archive. Inside, official documents. The gallery transferred fully to Ellie's name. Nonprofit registration finalized. The final notarized letter from Leah's lawyer. Short, formal, clean. There were no requests, no appeals, just closure dressed in paperwork. Ellie read it once, then filed it, not as proof, but as completion. Later that afternoon, he walked punked through the old district, past the bridge where he once stood watching Leah vanish in a cab. The shadows had shifted. The streets felt narrower, not with pressure, but with definition. He stopped at a bench overlooking the river. Saturday. Let the leash hang loose. Pulled out his phone. Typed a note. She tried to erase me in soft tones. I answered with structure. I was not loud. I was exact. He saved it. Not to post. Just to remember. Punked curled beside him, muzzle pressed against his ankle. A breeze moved through the trees like a hush instead of a warning. There would be no memoir. No public essay. No documentary. When people asked what happened between him and Leah, he'd say, "She left thinking she found something better. I stayed and found peace." And if they asked for more, he'd shrug, because he didn't know anyone the archive of his healing. Only the truth of how it felt to come out clean. Ellie stood, pocketed the phone, walked home slowly. No music in his ears, no urgency in his step. Just the sound of pause beside him and his own breathing, a steady, measured thing. Not a start, not an ending, a full stop. And finally, the breath that comes after. Truth doesn't shout. It doesn't demand an audience. It waits, quietly, patiently, until the masks slip on their own. In the end, Ellie didn't win with brilliance or vengeance. He won by refusing to perform, by choosing structure over spectacle, by letting silence become a container for everything words could not salvage. His life, once splintered by betrayal, did not heal by filling the void, but by honoring it. He learned that pain does not disappear when it's ignored. It sharpens. But when pain is named, curated, seen, it softens into meaning. Some stories aren't rewritten. They're simply closed. No revenge, no redemption arc. Just a man who reclaimed authorship over his own narrative, wordlessly. Now, when he walks in his gallery, he sees reflections of strangers who survived like he did, without explosion, without spectacle, but with clarity. The ones who didn't scream, the ones who didn't burn it all down, the ones who built something instead. And in that quiet, in that chosen stillness, a new chapter breathes. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to fight back, but to rebuild in a way that makes the lie irrelevant.